Good day, learners, and welcome to your online classes. Today, we are going to discuss about the IMRAD format, or the IMRD. Ready? Let's start. At the end of the lesson, you must be able to, first, compare and contrast the IMRAD and traditional formats of research using a Venn diagram. Second is to illustrate interest to the IMRAD format and publication of the research paper to online journals. Last but definitely not the least is to identify which section of the IMRAD format each statement belongs. Exciting, right? Let's now start our lesson. Let's now start with the recap questions to module number 5. First question: what are the 2 steps of formulating a research topic? Second question: what are the 3 criteria to consider in choosing a research topic? Last question: what are the 4 elements of a research or thesis title? Good job, learners! You have now gained the mastery in our module number 5. Now, I know that there is a huge question in your mind right now. What does the term IMRAD or IMRD means? I stands for introduction. M stands for method. R stands for the word result. And D stands for discussion. Now, as you can see in the diagram, this represents the IMRAD structure by Wu 2011. So there are parts that has dotted boxes, so that means that these are optional. Now, in his diagram, Wu clarified that the shape of each section under the IMRAD format represents how broad or how narrow each section should be, referring to when the paper focuses on the researcher's study and when to relate it to other researchers' work. Note that the questions at the right are the basic questions that would answer each section of the paper. So in your title, it must answer the question, what's it about? So it should include a brief, informative, and readily searchable by a person or a machine. The second part is your abstract. This should answer the question, what is it in a nutshell? Follow the IMRAD logic and highlight major findings. So in short, in your abstract, it should have the summary of your whole research. The third one is your introduction. So dito na papasok mga anak yung IMRAD. So introduction should answer the question, why did you do it? It should have the problem, importance known, unknown, and your research questions or hypotheses or objectives. So in short, the introduction should have the statement of the problem, the significance of the study, and also your hypothesis. Now, the fourth one is the study side. Now, this should answer the question, where did you do it? Why here? Relevance to your study. This may be part also of the methods. So guys, inside the study side, you can also put here your references like your RRL and your RRS. Now, the fifth one and the second part of the IMRAD is the methods. This should answer the question, how did you do it? Not only methods used, but also justifications for using them. So, in short, mga anak, dito sa loob ng methods, dito natin makikita kung paano ginather yung mga information na nakuha natin sa mga participants or respondents natin. Now, the sixth section and the third section in IMRAD is the results. This should answer the question, what did you find? This should include the summarized findings with headings and informative figures, but don't discuss yet. So in short, mga anak, dito na papasok sa results yung mga tabular methods natin, yung mga tallied answers ng ating mga participants and respondents. Now, the seventh part or the fourth part in the IMRAD format is the discussion. What does it mean and so what? So this involves the results explained, objectives achieved, limitations, implications for future and research application. So in short mga anak, nasa loob ng ating discussion yung explanation and interpretation of the results. Now the next section involves conclusion. So this should answer the questions, what are your major findings and their significance? Don't imply or repeat what has been said in the discussion because this may be part of the discussion. So in short mga anak, the conclusion may also be found in our discussion. Now the next one is the acknowledgements, which is all optional, and then the last but not the least part should be your references. It should be in the APA format 6th edition. We will now elaborate each section of the IMRAD. So the first section is the introduction. The introduction provides the rationale for the study. Basically, this section sets the stage for the research that is being done. More specifically, the introduction should be able to define the nature and scope of the study, relate the research to previous studies, set the objectives of the study, and define any term or abbreviation that are used throughout the study. In short, the introduction should provide the research question and explain the significance of the study. The next section is the methods. This section focuses on representing what has been done in the research and how it is done. This includes how the data is gathered. This section must be able to provide enough information to allow another researcher to either judge or replicate the study. So in short, mga anak, methods, describe your methods for the data gathering and explain your sources of information, both primary and the secondary. The fourth section of the IMRAD is the results. This section is considered the core of the study according to Nair 2014. Since it is the section where new knowledge is being presented, simply put, data that has been collected is being presented in this section. This data may be presented in textual and tabular forms, and statistical analysis may have already been performed on such data. In our results, mga anak, this should describe what you found out from your research. So in short, learners, the results must include the tabular methods that you did and the tallied answers of the respondents or the participants. We are now down to the last section of the IMRAD format, which is the discussion. The researcher explained what has happened based on the presented information in the results section and what the said information means or implies. Any generalization, relationship, or trend noticed in the data is pointed out in this part. So in short, our discussions should involve the explanation and the significance of your findings. So after being presented in our results, in your discussion, there has to be an explanation or the interpretation of data findings. Okay, learners, now I am going to give you a comparison to traditional format. So this is a comparison between the traditional format and the IMRD or the IMRAD format. So the first one, as you can see in the figure, your traditional method, which involves the chapter 1 introduction, is now put in your introduction in the IMRAD. If you can observe that there are broken lines there, that means that it can also be transferred in those parts. But it doesn't necessarily imply that it has to be in that part. So you have an option to put it in that part or not. So as you can see, the chapter introduction is put in the introduction and may also be put in your discussion. Now your chapter 2 or the review of related literature and studies in your traditional format will be placed also in your introduction. So there is an option that you don't have to put this RRL and RRS in your introduction. Now the third one or the chapter 3 in your traditional method, which involves research methodology and design, will be put in the methods. The fourth one or the chapter 4 in your traditional format, which involves presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data, will be put in two different parts. So the first one will be put in your results, or those are the tables and the tallied answers of the respondents. Now, the second one, you will also put it in your discussion because of the presentation and interpretation of data. Now, in your chapter 5, in your traditional method, which involves the summary of findings, conclusions, and recommendations, may be put in your discussion, or if you want to put it in a separate paper, like in your conclusion part, it can be inside the discussion or after the discussion. So as you can see, in the introduction of the IMRAD format, most parts of from the traditional chapter 1 remain intact. There is no explicit subsection on the review of related literature or in subject chapter 2, but are instead embedded in the introduction. So in short, you can still put your RRL or some of the RRL and RRS to your introduction. Now, in the methods, most parts from the traditional chapter 3 remain intact. So as you can see, this is actually the only part of the traditional and IMRAD format that remains the same. Now, the third one is the results. So the presentation and analysis portions of chapter 4 are moved here. So as you can see in our chapter 4, in your traditional format, we have presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data. But in our results, we only put 2, which are the analysis and the presentation of data. Now, how about the interpretation? The interpretation is moved in our discussion part. Aside from that, the summary and findings of every conclusions that you made during your research is also put or may be put in the discussion part. So the interpretation portion of chapter 4 is moved here. The summary and findings portion of chapter 5 are removed as those are redundant to this section. Limitations to the study or the chapter 1 are mentioned near the end, or condensed conclusion and recommendation are seen towards the end of the section. So in short, you can also put the limitations of the study here in the discussion part, or you can mention it again after mentioning it in your introduction. Alright. Now, learners, this is the summary of the whole module number 6. I am going to present to you the IMRAD outline. So the first one is the introduction. What you need to understand is that introduction provide research question and explain the significance of your question. The second part is the methods. What you need to remember in this part that it should describe your methods for gathering information. Explain your sources of information or the respondents and the participants that you have, both primary and secondary. Now, the third part is the results. What you need to remember in this part is that it should describe what you found out from your research. Now, the fourth and the last part of your IMRAD is the discussion. You should remember that discussion should involve the explanation of the significance of your findings. So, this is the part where you explain what the results are and why did you come up with these kinds of results. That's all for today, learners. Thank you and have a blessed day. I would like to remind you guys to please answer your Module 6. Now, if you happen to have any questions, please do not hesitate to approach any of your Practical Research 2 instructor. Thank you!
Happy learning at home with lessons made easy by Olivarian GoTeach. One proud Olivarian.